a weak ringgit is not good for our importers.
I mean, if that happens, it will be a major concern.
The ministers, the policymakers, they're not in the classrooms.
If you don't feel anything, then everything is wrong.
Is the media being too harsh with them?
Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Amalina Kamal, returning as your host for this latest round of Information Digest. Now, in this latest episode, we will be diving into 3 separate segments that span across multiple topics of interest that transpired over the week. First up, of course, we will be addressing the recent challenges in the financial landscape, particularly concerning the fluctuation of the Malaysian ringgit. Now, this, of course, raised questions about its impact on consumers, businesses, and the overall economy. Together with me, I have Sharon Kaur, Business Times editor. Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks, Amelina. It's great to be here today.
Together with Sharon, I have Zuraimi Abdullah, Business Times senior editor, who will be diving into this topic of interest together with us. Welcome, Zuraimi.
Thank you,
Right.
Malina.
In the second segment, we will be discussing proposed reforms in the education system. This follows Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim's recent address on Monday, where he highlighted that the government will work towards a better future in shaping a robust education system in light of the country's low score in the PISA ranking. For this, I have with me our news editor, Hazwin Hassan. Welcome, Hazwin, again on this latest episode of Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you, Amalina. It's always a pleasure to be back here.
Last but not least, in the segment after this, we will be also turning our attention to the recent developments in Malaysian sports, particularly concerning our national team's performance in the Asia Cup as well as the Olympic qualifiers. Now, I will have Fabian Peter joining me, but for now, I would like to first understand this whole topic on ringgit being the lowest point. We have a clip from Maybank Investment Berhad's very own ringgit expert. Let's take a look.
Ringgit is currently at the 472 level against the dollar. Our forecast for ringgit is actually close to these levels. We are looking at dollar ringgit actually in the first quarter of 2024 hovering around 470. We've actually forecasting these levels since late November last year, and actually it's panning out right now. But the question is whether these levels will remain as it is. Our view is we are looking at dollar ringgit is essentially sort of falling back towards the 460 to 470 range by second quarter of this year, before ending 2024 at about 440.
I would just like to open the floor with this question. What does this mean specifically to consumers as well as businesses moving forward, at least in the first quarter of the year? How should they navigate ringgit's position?
Okay, ringgit currently is at 472 level against the dollar. So some analysts, they have forecasted that this level should be around 470. Since late last year, in fact. Now the big question is whether it will go hover around 460, 470 at the end of this year, or whether it will actually touch 480 or perhaps even 5 ringgit. So if it does if that happens, it will be a major concern for, I think, industries across the board.
Obviously, a weak ringgit is not good for our importers, especially. And then at the public level, of course, parents with kids studying overseas will be most affected by the depreciation of the ringgit. But having said that, I think despite all the glooms or all the bearish views about the ringgit outlook, we are quite fortunate, because there are many economists who think that at the end of this new year, the ringgit will stabilize and will strengthen against the dollar. So we are there is a strong possibility that the ringgit will not hit that 500 level. Because like the head of FX from Maybank Investment Bank based in Singapore, what he said just now, that at the end of the year, their forecast for the ringgit is at 4.3, which to me I think is a bit over ambitious, because I think the reasonable level for the ringgit at the end of 2024 will be around 4.50.
Right.
One thing we can look at is the bilateral trade. For example, China, Malaysia. If it's actually possible for this to actually happen, if China can actually settle with us in terms of ringgit Malaysia, and we do business with China in renminbi, in terms of import exports, I think there can be some improvement in terms of trade and how companies will actually, their earnings will not suffer.
Fortunately, our trade with China is expected to be improving and becoming stronger and stronger this year. And in this case, the stronger Chinese economy will be very helpful for Malaysia, very beneficial for Malaysia, because we have seen talks or news about China's raising their imports from Malaysia, especially when it comes to palm oil. So this bodes well for our country and as well as the ringgit.
We also have, together with us, Bank Muamalat Malaysia Bhd Chief Economist, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, on the call. Doctor, welcome to Beyond the Headlines. We have a couple, or at least a number of questions for you concerning ringgit's low position. First, of course, is, with ringgit closing lower against USD ahead of its US data, which we reported earlier this week. In what ways does Malaysia's lower inflation rate in 2023 compared to the previous year influence the dynamics of the ringgit against the US dollar and other major currencies?
Factors that influence ringgit is always been the external factor, which revolves around the interest rate in the major economies, especially in the US. Since 2022, the Federal Reserve has been raising their interest rates quite aggressively, from 0.25% to 5.5% in less than a year. So such level, 5.5%, has remained there for quite some time, and in comparison with our overnight policy rates, which stands at about 3%, so the gap between those two rates favors the US dollar view, which means that investing in US dollar assets could yield more returns compared to investing in Malaysian assets. So that sort of set the tone for our ringgit movement. But beyond US dollar, of course, there are other factors as well that can have an impact in terms of the movement of the ringgit, which also revolves around the sustainability of the economy, and to some degree, political stability will always be in the investors' radar, especially the foreign investors' radar, on how they would assess Malaysian economy and how that would translate into opportunities for them to come in and invest in Malaysia. For now, what we see, the ownership by foreign investors in the bond market, in the stock market, is quite low. So perhaps that actually reflects their confidence level in terms of the trajectory of our economy, and to a large degree on the political scenarios. So I think those are the key questions that can affect the movement of ringgit. But safely to say, predominantly ringgit will be influenced by the external factors, which is the US dollar, and essentially we will talk about the US interest rates now.
Thank you, Doctor. Following up to that, I just want to understand, how might the monetary policy decisions, specifically from the Bank of Japan as well as the European Bank, Central Bank, further affect the foreign exchange markets here, especially in relation to the performance of ringgit?
Okay, how we can detail the impact, maybe we should make some comparison, meaning the US rates and the stand of monetary policy as opposed to other major central banks' interest rates and their monetary policies. For now, I think the Federal Reserve really stands out in terms of their their commitment to maintain such a high level of interest rates, as opposed to other central banks like Bank of Japan. The Bank of Japan, at the moment, they still continue to practice negative interest rates. Their benchmark interest rate now stands at minus 0.1%. And yesterday's meeting showed that Bank of Japan have yet to, change their monetary policy stance. So that would actually it stands out. Similarly, in the case of European Central Bank, I think the recent remarks by their ECB governor, Christian Lagarde, she said that there could be a possibility that they might want to reduce their rate at some point in the future. So again, given the guidance from these two central banks, it seems that US is likely to have a higher interest rate, higher for longer narratives, which would make holding US dollar denominated assets will give a better returns. So on that note, in the grand scheme of things, holding a US dollar asset will give a better returns.
I just want to understand what are the potential economic implications for both Malaysia and Singapore due to the cross-border movement of individuals seeking higher net savings or engaging in tourism activities such as all this shopping trips.
There are two sides of the weakening of ringgit. If you talk about inbound tourists from abroad, especially from Singapore, I think that it will be a positive effect to our economy because Singaporeans will bring their own money and spend their money in Malaysia. So that creates demand for our goods and services, and there will be some positive spillover effects in terms of our major industries like accommodations, retail, events and whatnot. I think that's the positive part. The negative implication, obviously, if we have goods and services that we need to purchase from them, or if we plan to visit Singapore. So that would actually increase our cost of doing business. And as a business, I think if they have goods that are coming from Singapore, definitely they have to pay more. And in that sense, they have to, as a business, they have to plan and figure out what are the best way to mitigate this situation, so that their profit margins will not be affected by so much because of the depreciation of ringgit.
Last question on behalf of the panel here. How low or how high do you think it could be? Not by the end of the year. Let's draw it a little bit closer. By June at least. By June.
Basically, what we are looking at for ringgit, we are projecting that ringgit to strengthen to around 450 per US dollar, simply because we are anticipating that the Fed will actually start to cut rates at some point this year. This has been guided by the Federal Open Market Committee, which is the committee that will decide the interest rate in the US. So they have been projecting that they might want to cut down their interest rates by 4.6% by this year. So that will give around 75 basis points cut from the current level. So because of the expectation of low rates in the US, that should translate into a weak dollar, and inevitably would mean strong ringgit. So that's the main premise why we think ringgit to appreciate by end of this year.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Afzanizam. It's a pleasure to have you here on Beyond the Headlines. Hopefully next round, you'll be here on the set. So I want to bring our focus back to the panel here. Reactions, maybe. Zuraimi.
Okay. On the correlations between the ringgit and our monetary policy, looking at the issues from an interest rate differentials perspective, our own overnight policy rate was at 3% pre-pandemic, and as it stands now, it is back to 3% as of today, because Bank Negara just announced that they are not going to change the current level of OPR. Means that it will stay at 3% until the next Bank Negara's monetary policy committee meeting, which will happen, I think, few more weeks, at least 2 or 3 months down the road. But having said that, if we compare to the key interest rate in the US as well as in Singapore, our close neighbor, during the pre-pandemic, the key interest rate in the US was only 2.75%, but now it stands at 5.25%. 5%. And in the case of Singapore, the key interest rate pre-pandemic level stood at 2.8%. Now it is 3.8%. That this means that these two countries have increased significantly their interest rate, their key interest rate post-pandemic now. But for our side, for Malaysia, we don't have to follow the footsteps of these two countries in determining whether we are going to raise our interest rate at a rapid pace.
Right.
So today, what Bank Negara did was sensible, in my opinion, by not raising the interest rate much higher, or in other words, they keep maintaining the current level, which is highly lauded move from our central bank.
When I spoke to several market experts, they said the government is doing their best, Bank Negara is doing their best. So probably, they feel that this could just be short term, and given a few weeks or months, everything will be back to normal. People will be so used to the fact that the rates are such levels, and things. One of the major concerns is that they expect more people to be taking advantage of this. The strengthening of the like example, Singapore dollars is about 3.53, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So you actually see a lot of people going to Singapore to look for jobs. So that will be one of the concerns. Yeah.
A brain drain, perhaps? Are we looking at a potential another phase of brain drain?
Probably, yep.
We will definitely be checking on it daily, right? When it
Yeah,
concerns the
definitely.
ringgit. Let's just hope that the prospect of it is brighter as we move forward. Right, and moving on to the second segment, we want to talk about the revival of the education system. This was in light of Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim addressing to the audience recently after announcing the country scoring very low in the PISA score, which is the Program for International Student Assessment. Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim mentioned that failure by some quarters to acknowledge the flaws in the education system had actually hampered the industry's growth and led Malaysia to become, by standards, even the worst in ASEAN. Oof, that's very deep. And for this segment, we have Hazwin here only because, fun fact, she was previously a lecturer for 10 years.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right. And prior to that, you were also teaching primary school students.
Yes, for a short while, actually, just before I joined the industry. Actually, it was earlier last year. It was back in January when I last taught in that school. It was it was a private school, but basically I taught secondary school children, or students rather. Yeah.
Going back to this topic of interest, right? Specifically on Anwar's call to relook at how we are managing our education system, he highlighted a few things, but one of it is to reform the preschool education system to also align with higher education reforms. Maybe Hazwin, you can give a better visibility in terms of the teacher-student ratio and why such reform is needed.
Yes, we kind of do have to go all the way back to the earliest stages of childhood development, and that would be preschool. So I would second the Prime Minister's concerns, where he raised, it's time to see some reforms happening, especially at that early stage, in preschools. Reason being is that we've seen a bit of decline after seeing, for many years over the last decade, just prior to COVID, we've seen a drop in enrollment in preschools. And that was just before 2020. We hit a high actually in 2019 where we saw the highest percentage rate of preschool enrollment in our country. And if I can just draw your attention to some stats, that was part of a report by the World Bank Group, which they published this report actually last year in 2023, so some few months ago, and it was published in May. And at our highest, which was 2019, at our peak, our enrollment rate for preschoolers was at around about 85%. Now, if you compare that to other developed countries, In fact, if you can pull up the chart on this, we're not far behind countries like Ireland, Sweden, Poland, Finland, where on average they have about 100% enrollment, right, for preschoolers. And just to sort of clarify, preschool covers the ages between 4 to 6 at least.
Right.
At least that's how we kind of view it in Malaysia. So in 2019, we were doing okay, but then it dropped a little bit in 2020. And we saw this drop obviously because of the effects of the pandemic. But moving on from 2020, this drop hasn't seen an increase. And in fact, it is even more concerning because not only have we've seen a drop in the rate of enrollment, but the trends, as in previously public and private preschools were doing well in terms of enrollment. So people were both sending their children to private preschool, those who can afford it, and were able to pay up, a fee for private education for their children, as well as public preschools that had a really good uptake as well. But then it switched in 2014, and then we saw more people actually willing to pay more for private preschools for their children, and then there was a lower enrollment rate in the public preschools. And so while this is quite a good thing, but then because of the pandemic, and we saw the drop in 2020 in the rate overall, both public and private preschools, this has just continued to drop. Now, one thing we have to address here is perhaps before people were willing to pay more for better quality education for their children, and that's why we saw the change in, there was a complete switch in 2014 where, private schools had more enrollment. But it's concerning because after the pandemic, cost of living, that's the main reason that people have cited why we see this drop.
Option of sorts.
Yes, basically. So it was good to see that the uptake in private schools was increasing. It was good. And then, even though perhaps public schools needed to do some sort of review on why there was a drop, but then generally since 2020, there has been this drop, and this is what's concerning because it's not just about the outcome, or rather what we can see on the surface is, we're not seeing as many preschoolers in preschool. But the other thing underlying this to the problem is the fact that we are still grappling, the people here in this country are still grappling with high cost of living, and that needs to be addressed. The Prime Minister rightly, towards the end, and he made these remarks, I think just earlier this week on Monday, he did touch on this, and he is calling for this reform in all stages of education in Malaysia, but particularly in preschools. And one of the things he did highlight was to make it more accessible and more affordable.
Is there an ideal timeline to, see through this implementation of the suggested reforms for both preschools and higher learning institutions?
Right. So for preschools per se, under the Malaysia Education Blueprint, we have this plan. We set it since 2013, and we're supposed to meet a goal by 2015. Now, the thing was that the initial goal set was actually to achieve 100% preschool enrollment for all toddlers or children between the ages of 4 and 6 by 2020. That was the earlier goal that was set, but we couldn't meet that, and so now that target has been pushed further to 2025. So unless we are more proactive about going about this, then we might have to shift the goalpost even further and see, this blueprint, this Malaysia Education Blueprint, being still kind of a faraway dream. So, in other words, what it means is that we have to get the ministries involved and agencies under the education ministries to really work together, collaborate, make sure that stakeholders are in on it as well, and that we get their feedback. If we want to see a revamp and we want to see a really good change, in the education system as a whole, then it's going to take, number one, especially when the government sets policies, it's going to take a number of years to at least see any kind of transformation. So even from there, say, starting from the preschool, the product at the end, what we want to see is that from preschool to then primary school children to then secondary school, it takes a certain amount of years. So to actually see the results of the policies that have been put into effect, number one, we have to consider the time. But if we're not proactive from now, then this deadline, this goal set for 2025, it's just going to have to be pushed further.
Okay. I also want to talk about the recent address in that Prime Minister made, also called for suggestions to make varsity institutions more independent. What do you think about that?
A story that we put out, I think was it yesterday, in fact. You wrote the story yourself, right?
Yes.
And you had an interview with the president of the National Council of Professors.
MPN, yes.
Yes.
If I can just
Sure.
highlight across. So while they agree in terms of, these highlight of the flaws in the education system, the loopholes that we might address, but to evaluate the education system as a whole not being robust enough, they should not be just relying on the PISA score, because the PISA score only looks at certain key areas. And when I say key areas, it's like certain subject matters even. It's not even student development, it's not even leadership qualities, it's not even to the extent of education aspirations. But they did, MPN and a few other educationists did call for a review for the education system as a whole to ensure that we can build better environment for the teachers as well as the students.
Adding to what you just introduced there, the president, Professor Datuk Dr. Radwan, he is trying to highlight that while, yes, number one, qualified academics teachers in the schooling system is obviously, goes without saying, that's a must.
Right.
But the other thing that we have on independence, the other thing that we have to focus on is to have teachers who are critical in thinking. Critical thinking needs to be emphasized,
Right.
because while it's important obviously to follow a curriculum, but if you don't allow, as you pointed out earlier, teachers to have a room for autonomy in terms of what they think is best for their pupils, we're not going to see much of a change. Because if you look at OECD countries, OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation Development. So OECD means basically all the developed countries in the West, right? So if you look at the syllabus and the curriculum that they have in schools in the West, and I being a product of that because I grew up in the UK when I was a child, it's the concerns that they have, the goals that they have for the pupils in school is far-reaching beyond the school years. Whereas here, perhaps we're too bogged down again on this exam-oriented curriculum, where at the end of the day, it's very summative. And then, when we used to have it, we had the UPSR, which is the school leaving exam for primary schoolers, right? So, and then after that, you'd have your PMR and then the SPM. So it's the orientation of schooling here, it's very exam-based. So when you have this summative goal in mind, that's really all you're pursuing. I guess a common saying is that you can't judge, you can't judge the ability of a fish by having it climb a tree, right? Because obviously it's not meant to climb trees, it's meant to swim. So in the same way, that's the focus that we need more in our schools. And yes, critical thinking. Let the teachers have more autonomy, more independence, although they should be bound by the curriculum, obviously. But let them exercise their independence and be critical in thinking and have that freedom to address their pupils more on a one-on-one basis. If I can be honest, the ministers, the policymakers, they're not in the classrooms.
Right.
The teachers are.
Right.
So we see how these pupils, these students progress.
So when it comes to education, it concerns us all because it starts from home up until when you're, when you have a child of your own of that sort.
I think perceived notion that parents do tend to expect a lot out of schools, out of teachers, to instill whatever values, whether it's to do with their academic achievements or even beyond that, right? Like a holistic overview of the child's development. But it should be a balance. There should be a balance, really, because from my point of view, having been in the industry for about a decade almost, I feel like when parents leave it completely just to the schools and just to the teachers, that's when, we start seeing this disconnect. And the real victims in this situation are the children.
Hasbin, I came across this very interesting article that came out in the New Straits Times. Some say that we actually have a broken education system. We've had 10 governments and they have done 10 different things. Okay, so they believe that there is a disconnect between schools, education departments and the ministry. Can I have your say on that?
Okay, number one, the government needs to stop changing policies every, 5 or so years. Because again, the real victims are the children in this case. And this just hinders development. We've been switching from Malay to English, the last 20 years, and it's always been used. Again, if I can be honest, it's always been used to politicize things, and it never helps. It just never helps, and you see all this disconnect. It stems from this. So if the government can just finally agree on something that will benefit everyone, based off on good research, good policy making, considerations being made, having the right people to make the policy in the first place. That's obviously, number one. But yeah, if the government can just agree on the best thing and then stick with that for a good number of years, then we can start seeing good change coming in.
Right, that nicely wraps up this particular segment of the show. I would just like to thank again my panel here today. Zuraimi, thank you for sitting in with us, Hazwin, as well as Sharon.
Thank you.
Now, to our audience, please stay tuned as we will come back. Together with me, I will have Fabian as well as a sport expert to talk about the national team's performance in the Asian Cup as well as the Olympic qualifiers and the dilemma surrounding badminton. Don't go anywhere. Now capping this episode with the last segment, but certainly not the least, I have here with me Fabian Peter from the sports desk. Thank you so much, Fabian.
Hi, Lola.
Hello. It's always a pleasure to have Fabian together in the room because he'll light up the set. But this is your first time.
Yeah, this is my first time actually.
Are you excited?
Of course I am.
Okay.
Very excited.
Right. It's interesting to know how, our Malaysian team performed in the Asia Cup. But for me, as a spectator, I have my own set of opinions.
Yep.
But as, a sports pundit, or at least someone who has to follow the tournaments and each and every event closely, play developments of sorts, you want to know, what goes on behind the scene as well.
Yep.
Also, together with us, we have our sports expert, Datuk Dr. Ramlan Abdul Aziz. Datuk is a sport medicine expert and formerly the National Sports Institute Chief Executive Officer. Welcome on Beyond the Headlines again, Datuk.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here again. What do I call you actually?
Amalina.
Amalina.
Yes.
You calling something else?
Oh,
Lola.
yeah.
Lola.
It's my nickname. But
I see. Okay,
Right.
okay. We're not at that level yet, no. So I call you Amalina.
Right. I mean, to begin,
Yeah.
Fabian, maybe you can give our audience a little, description about how Malaysian football fared in the Asian Cup so far.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Datuk, we would dive straight into what's happening currently, or what has been making the headlines,
Okay.
at least in this first couple of weeks of the new year.
Yeah.
We've got 3 major sporting events, namely the Malaysia Open for badminton, which was at the start of the year, and then our players went to India to play at the India Open. And then we've got football, where our football team is in Qatar playing in the Asia Cup. And then we will also touch a little bit about hockey.
Okay.
You know, where our team have failed to reach the Olympics, having lost a couple of matches and then, you know, drawing in the group stages. So I think, Datuk, what we would like you to talk about, or what we'd like to get your perspective, in general, you know, what has caused this somewhat of a decline, if I may say so, in sports?
Well, to start with, I think we need to know, to look at the processes by which we enter into any competition. In the first place, you need to look forward and not be too hung up on what's happening right now. But at the same time, you just need to, you know, have a quick look over your shoulder, see what went wrong. There's always a tendency for people to always have a strong opinion when something goes wrong.
Yes.
But when something is right and we are successful, we forget to analyze that as well, because everybody is busy celebrating. Yes? Everybody is slapping everybody else on each other on their backs and all that. But they forget that did you win because you were really good or in spite of your weaknesses? And also, whatever strengths you may have, never mind your weaknesses that you have to address, whatever strengths you may have, there's always room for improvement. And our opposition, the players that, the teams that we have to play against, are never static. They will also progress. And if we live like macam katak bawah tempurung, right? And we think we are so great in our small universe, without actually, you know, upending that coconut shell and looking at the universe before you, then you stand a very big chance of actually feeling smug with your own weaknesses, you know. Yes? Big fish in a small pond sort of mentality. We've heard talk about people saying that we are celebrating mediocrity and all that. In a sense, that is true. But let's you know, take a breather here for a while and consider the fact that sports doesn't exist in a vacuum. Right? Sports is still a cross-section of society at large. So what is out there is our failure too, as a society. Because sports, education, you know, the way family upbringing, you know, is being done nowadays. See, it's a reflection of the society at large. So then, if you if you want to have a roots to branches solutions to this sort of thing, which is actually needed at this point, overdue, I would say, then you have to put your ear to the ground. To put your ear to the ground, that means any opinion, whether it is any opinions when you fail, will never be complimentary. You will be spicy, and it will rile you up, annoy you even. But you have to look past your emotion and look at the gist of the thing. So, how in a sea of subjectivity, you have to objectivize your mission.
It's interesting you mentioned, because sports and the society at large, or, you know, the spectators who you know, tune in, has this kind of kinship that it's hard to break, right? But of course, we have to address the topic of interest, which is the Asia Cup and Malaysia's impending early exit. Unfortunately, we do still have a match this coming, I think, on Thursday. Although this episode will be aired on Friday. Let's talk about it in general, because we put so much hope for our national team to perform, and only to be, I won't say disappointed, but it's just that we feel sad, you know, that we are not able to achieve a certain target that we set out for.
You need to have an emotional reaction to this. You need to. If you don't feel anything, then everything is wrong. Yes? When you don't feel anything, because you don't care. The reason why you feel something is because you care. But you cannot be caring too much, right? You cannot be carrying this burden together with the players themselves, because the players have to accept swallow their disappointment and move on. To move on, you cannot move on and not having learned the lessons that you need to learn at that point, or the lessons of the past as well. So I feel that people have been clamoring for a review, things like that. Yeah, but it needs to be done by independent parties. It cannot be done by the very people who might be complicit in the whole process, right? They might well be the ones who caused the trouble in the first place.
Datuk, just going back to the Asia Cup, and it's interesting that Amalina would bring out about the results, right, and targets. But you see, going into the Asia Cup for the first time in many years, qualifying on merit, playing in this group where we have Jordan, Bahrain, South Korea. Malaysia is the lowest rank as compared to these guys. What were we going in expecting?
Well, the burden of our expectations, isn't it? Because we have to have realistic expectations.
Yes.
But of course, you always harbor a dream of beating people who are on paper better than you. That is always there's always a possibility. But how do you go from possibility to probability? So this is something that I feel if you go into a tournament, the minimum standard is to have a good performance. Okay, so if you don't have a good performance, even though you win, then you are also you're going to perpetuate a platform for failure later on. So it's always about the performance first. So every time you have even a win, like I said, you must know why you win as much as why you lose. So I feel that people have lost this ability to accept criticism for themselves. The biggest critic should be the person that you face in the mirror every morning. That should be the way. So that everything else that follows, people outside who never know the journey that you have to take.
But should they, or at least not just athletes in question, but like the team as a whole, avoid going into competitions being underprepared? Sending teams being underprepared? Because what I'm trying to gather is that you would agree that our national team has certain tactical flaws, because as you win, you have to have performance. I'm trying to equate it to the strategy here, and in their performance there were comments on that, like there's no tactic, and if there's no tactic, why are you there? So should the team be looking at who they're fielding for the competitions moving forward?
The problem is this, I think we got a good coach. We have a good coach. He knows how to coach. But the thing is, that's not enough. You see, the players need to want this more than the coach. Like I said, if they have to listen to the coach, I'm always talking. This applies to other sports as well, even badminton. You have to have, you have to be educated enough. It's not enough for you to be fancy dan players, juggling the ball 2,752 times, right? Because that's not football. That's a circus act. Right? You play, there's 11 guys on the team, and how many on the bench? I don't know. So then you have to listen and adhere to the coach's instructions. Because if you don't follow his instructions to the letter, to the best of your ability, then we are setting ourselves up for failure. The most important thing is that I feel that you must have a clear idea of how you're going to play this team. And if you're going to come there and try to wing it, it will never work. Okay? It might work, but it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. You need to know why you're doing it, and you cannot approach every team the same way. Of course, there's some really, there's a big case for the Contes and the Postecoglou's of EPL, where I play a certain way, even if I have 5 on the way, I'll still play the same way. In the long term, okay, but this is a tournament, A tournament has a certain number of players, and then because ni kalah mati kan, right? And then if you fail, you're out. Or if you don't get past the group stage, you're out. So the most important thing is you have to play according to whom you're facing.
How important is preparation, especially in acclimatizing with the team that you're about to face off? Right. For instance, like, should there be more friendlies for our football teams with international counterparts just to elevate themselves better?
Well, it is helpful playing friendlies. That's why they're there. But the process is still the same. Do people actually analyze our opponents by looking at the videos of how they play and all that? Video analysis is there, It's been there for quite a while now. Since the
it's just not being utilized properly.
Well, the thing is, when you do that, it's not the coach's party, where he talks and all that. People have to watch and they have to analyze themselves how to do this. With another sport, okay, which we will discuss later.
Yeah.
I remember last time I was team doctor for the badminton team. Okay. And I was watching the other players because I like to watch other players, other coaches, because that's how you learn, isn't it? If you look at yourself, and then when we finish, we will have a shower and then we go shopping. The Danes, the Koreans, the Japanese, they stay behind. The players stay behind. No coach is there. They have a notebook. They analyze their future opponents and all that. They take notes. Can you imagine? Players, this notational analysis, right? So when they play, they no need to look back at the face of a coach who's panicking as much as they themselves. Okay, how are we going to play? No, you have to come up with the answers by yourself. So you have to start to become a thinking player. And thinking players does not come from a training camp, 2 weeks before the tournament. Okay, if you look at the lives of our champions like Nicole David, Azizul Hasni, Lee Chong Wei, they have practically undergone dispensed away with their youth, their enjoyment, parties, no parties. What parties are we talking about? Once in a while we can have biasa lah.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, they have sacrificed a lot, and they will never let that sacrifice come to naught, right? Come to waste. They will never waste that, because otherwise it doesn't stand to reason. You might as well give up from the beginning. So this is the most important thing. And to do this, all of us elders have to actually regard them and deal with them in a certain way, not mollycoddle them in a way that will put them on a pedestal, and when it becomes too difficult, you cannot bring them down.
Now, from football, we move into something that has a bit of I would say like a effect that is, a chain reaction. We go to badminton right now, and we have the large chunk of them who are also part of the Road to Gold program.
Okay.
And we know that these guys are in the run to qualify for the Olympics this year.
Yeah.
We've got our former world champions in our men's doubles, Aaron Chia Sowik. We have our mixed doubles who broke into the world top 10 within a year, Tang Jae and To Iwei.
Yeah.
But they did not get that perfect start to the year, right? At the Malaysia Open, none of our Malaysian players made it beyond the quarterfinal stage.
Yeah.
Right? And then at the India Open, it was only Aaron and Weik who were the last standing ones.
Yeah.
So fans are not happy, naturally, right? They're not happy. But it's that same old blame game all over again.
Yeah.
Is it BAM's fault? Are the fans being too soft with the athletes? Is the media being too harsh with them?
Okay.
So who's to blame? Or do we need to panic now, with less than 7 months to go before the Olympics?
You know the saying, the fat woman hasn't come out to sing. Not good, huh? I mean, it's such a bad way to say things. But it's not over yet, yes? Yeah. And we should be glad that all the weaknesses are coming out now. We should be glad, because it gives us fertile ground to look at things and address those things. The worst thing that can happen is we win all these opens and all that, and then when it comes to the Olympics, we don't get there. Yeah, we qualify to turut serta, meramaikan majlis. So this is something that we have to look at things positively. Every darkness, there'll be a ray of light coming out. So we try to look for that. At the end of the day, we have to learn now. Okay, we got a former world champion, a pair, Aaron and so.
Yep.
So I feel that, of course, we can expect them to be in the best position because they are there or thereabouts.
Yes.
The rest, we can expect them to give their best performances, but perhaps those who are just emerging, coming to the top 10, Ong Ziong, the singles players, and then the mixed doubles, perhaps they need to come up with a proud performance that makes everybody proud, and then prepare themselves, take all of that in, prepare themselves for the next Olympics. They'll still be young enough. So I feel that when we do this, our lessons have to be learned not only for this Olympics, for the next Olympics, and also for the next Olympics after that, because we cannot afford to look at things in bits and pieces, in the short term, every 5 years, and then we change policies and all that. No, tak boleh.
Yeah.
You have to have this consistency, because everything goes on, and then one day you won't be there, I won't be there, but the system, the process has to be there. It has to be right, and it has to be constantly renewed, re-energized and all that.
We're looking at least 3 Olympic cycles.
There you go.
Yeah.
I've said this many times already, to some people, to many people actually, and they accept this.
Yeah.
But sometimes they themselves have difficulty, because sometimes you look at the thing and you think it's such a big problem. Where do we start? Well, when I get a patient, the first thing I do is get the history of the problem, the medical problem. So it includes the past history, right? Sometimes some people think that all the answers will lie before them in the future, but now we keep looking at this with hockey, with badminton. It's like a recurring nightmare, isn't it? Right? Shattered dreams and all that. So let's pick it up, because at the end of the day, if you don't want to pick that up and look at it with cold, 360 view, open eyes, open heart, then you won't learn anything, and it will keep coming back. All those dreams will become shattered. Shattered dreams will become nightmares and all that. So I feel that in the end, look, I speak philosophically, right? I speak philosophically. But if you don't have a philosophy, you don't have a tactical approach and all that, then you need to have a style, right? So let's take hockey, for example. When they played last time, they played in Asian type of style. All right. So dulu Coach Paramalingam, my old friend, he said during those days, dog, they play TikTok, because they move the ball about. But then the Europeans came, and then suddenly they played on AstroTurf, right? And one big whack, and suddenly no need for TikTok, like you said before. The ball moves faster.
Yeah.
The hockey ball moves even faster. That's the issue, isn't it? Yeah. So I feel that you need to look at the game in general first, philosophical, then you hone in on the specifics. Otherwise, your specifics doesn't have something to tether yourself to,
With recent reports, I mean, not just recent reports, we see player reports as well, like all the statements that they make sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's very wild. It's like even wilder than certain politicians. But anyway, but in addressing, all fan and stakeholder criticism, what sort of transparent communication strategies can BAM actually implement to rebuild trust?
Well, for a start, they established that advisory panel right? For the academy. The first meeting was the only meeting so far.
What does that say?
February. What does that say?
Yeah.
That it speaks loudly for itself, doesn't it? But the most important thing, we need to review. So perhaps this is the chance for them to sit down, right, and review the whole thing, because they're all past champions and all that.
Correct.
Plus the odd technical guy,
Yeah.
right. So then you sit down, you decide, you have a certain members, and then analyze, because year after year they're busy playing tournaments. When they come back, and then off they go to another busy play.
It's hectic. It's hectic. It's very hectic. In fact, like badminton, BWF scheduling is super tight. So if you're talking about being a top 10 player, you're required to play in a minimum of like 15 events, tournaments a year. This is excluding your multi-sport events, your Asian Games, and everything. So
the main.
Yeah,
stuff,
let's just take Zija alone, for example. I think Zija played in more than 21 or 22 tournaments just last year.
Right.
Alone.
Too many.
Yeah.
There was once an issue with Datuk Lee Chong Wei, right? He was playing 20 plus, just like that. And then we decided to advise the coaching panel to pull it back a bit, because there's no time for recovery. And then also you
Right.
build up incidences of injuries, small nagging injuries, which actually compromise your ability to perform well. And then people always look, I think he's mentally weak. I laugh at this,
Okay.
You know why? Because what have you studied and investigated to make that brilliant conclusion?
Right.
In current badminton, especially badminton, I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult because the players, the coaches, the management do not have a choice. You know,
Okay.
if these guys are playing in 20 odd tournaments a year,
Yeah.
the world number one is also playing in 20 odd tournaments a year because he must play in all
Right.
these tournaments as well. And what's not so good for us Malaysians is that our players have not, some of them have yet to secure their qualification for, let's say, the Olympics. So they've got no choice. Like a player like Ziyong, for example,
Understand.
unfortunate to pick up an injury in the Malaysia Open. Now he has to skip so many tournaments, and then the coaches will have to review his tournament planning because they need to make up for all that lost points.
How many times have you seen we play like heroes in the semi-final and then we have nothing for the final? Okay, why? Because we celebrate that semi-final to the point as if it's the final, number one, and then we fail to stop celebrating quickly and then address issues of recovery, makan, food, rehydration, physical rest, and all that, and then retune your mind to the final, to that opponent you're going to see in the final.
Right. Let's wrap up with hockey.
Uh-huh.
Right. Hockey, our national hockey team was unable to qualify for the Olympics, which is unfortunately a sad news for us.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is so? Who is to blame? And of course,
No.
did we even have enough time to prepare?
Look. In the first instance, can I? Okay.
Sure.
It's not about who to blame. It's who will take responsibility for this. If you blame people, you put people on the defensive. Suddenly it's not coming out. But if you say who will take responsibility, then who's the brave soul amongst you who will hold up his hand? Look, I have a share in the blame. Right? I take responsibility. I did not do this enough. I do not do enough. I did too much of that. So we need to do this, because at the end of the day, you want to be a champion, you have to have the character of a champion, and champions with good character take responsibility. Not only players, but also coaches and also people who surround them.
The last time Malaysian hockey team qualified for the Olympics was 24 years ago.
I was still team doctor, my friend.
Year 2000,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sydney Olympics.
Yeah.
And I mean, just looking at reports, some of these reports were even reported by us, right? The signs were already showing since the Asian Games when we finished sixth.
Yeah.
The target was to win that goal and secure our Olympic spot, but they finished sixth, right?
Didn't we do very well, better than expected at the one preceding the Asian Games? Champions Trophy or something? Asian
Yes, we
Champions
did. We did. I mean,
Trophy?
it was because of that they had this expectation that, okay, we lost narrowly to India in the final.
Yeah.
So, going into the Asian Games, the target was to win gold.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So they had to play in the qualifiers, right? And in the qualifiers, we lost to China.
Yeah.
And of course, we lost to Great Britain.
Yes.
And then we drew against Pakistan. And,
There was some talk, that we had peaked at the tournament preceding the Asian Games, because we needed to get it right at the Asian Games.
Yeah.
The qualifiers are always going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, we know that. So I feel that there's something that needs to be addressed in terms of the preparation as well. All right, because it's all about looking at the training blocks and all that, the short term and the long term physical, physiological inputs and all that, and the psychological preparation. There was some talk about the other teams holding back as well at the Asian Champions Trophy, because they do not, because hockey, you don't want to show your best penalty corners, yes, right? You hold back because that's not the end game. The end game is the Asian Games, and the team that finishes top of the pile qualifies straight away.
Yes.
There you go. So maybe we missed a trick or two somewhere.
as you said, Datuk, you were the team doctor, back then, and I think
Makes me feel old lah.
over the years we've seen so many coaches
No, I am old.
come and go, right?
Yeah.
So many coaches come and go, and I think that gives us somewhat of an indication that not just in hockey, but regardless in any sports, sometimes it's not just about coaches. You can bring in the best coaches.
Yeah.
You can keep changing coaches. Can change the entire management.
Yeah.
But results are not going to come overnight.
No.
So how do we tackle this issue?
I had a conversation with John Beasley, the track cycling coach.
Coach, yes.
In fact, and I was always taken by the fact that when he's talking about Azizul Hasni, he's also talking about the simple, track he wants to help build in Dungon or something like that.
Yeah.
He's thinking about the future as well, because I feel sometimes we don't have the best coaches in development. Everybody wants to be the national coach, to go to the Olympics. Okay, but we have the best coaches in development as well, right? And we have in hockey in the past, right? And that's a good thing. But it has to be sustainable. It has to be something that you can continue. So then it comes down to what? The players. Like I said, the players have to be above the society that produces them. Because if they are beset with all the problems of society, all the weaknesses and all that, then how can they be the champions, the heroes for society? So I think the way we prepare them, all the people involved. I'm not blaming anybody, because the responsibility is shared. Okay, from the ministry to National Sports Council, Olympic Council, National Sports Institute, and all the clubs set up and all that. Everybody is responsible. When you ask me who is to blame, I am saying they are all responsible, and they have to play their part. And there has to be. I remember last time, just as a name, you played football before, and when you have a proper tournament, you play most of the year, right? But nowadays, if you look at some of the tournaments, 2014, I went to the Tun Razak Stadium, and there was a school tournament, and they played only 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and from that they're supposed to select players, and one after another, playing in the hot afternoon sun, 11 o'clock, noon, past noon.
Yes.
So, and they're only playing then, then they're supposed to have some selection. Then I feel that this is part of the reason, because sports in education, sports is one of the biggest elements of education. It teaches you beyond the lessons at school, because sports will not only give you the heroes, it will also make the non-heroes healthy, away from crime. Yes, and suddenly your health and social indices will improve. So how much is that worth to you? How much are you spending?
Actually. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, just talking about sports, I don't think we have, the time's not enough. We can, both of us can just, or three of us can just sit down here until the cows come home.
Hence,
and,
well, the cows have already come home. But anyway,
the cows are circling.
that's the thing. But
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure to have you again, Dato.
Pleasure for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
always insightful discussions, as
Yeah.
well as having you, Fabian, first time joining us on the set.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely, we will repeat this again to our audience back at home. This is the end of our episode, unfortunately. We uncovered a lot of topic of interest this particular week. If you do love this episode and the whole series, do like and subscribe to our channel, as well as across all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, as well as Twitter and ST Online. My name is Amalina Kamal, and on behalf of my panel here, Fabian, Datuk Ramlan, thank you again so much. Tune in to us in the next episode.